They were knocking on the door like they were trying to rescue me. 5 minutes, Isabel. Someone shouted from the hallway outside the courthouse bridal suite. But I wasn't drowning. Not in water, anyway. Just in tulle and expectation. I stared at myself in the mirror. The white dress, ivory satin with delicate lace and a sweetheart neckline, was beautiful, custom-fitted, and absolutely suffocating. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking. But I was gasping for air, the way someone might in a dream right before they wake up screaming. I lifted the hem to glance at my feet. Heels. For inches. I hated heels. Thomas picked them. Elegant, he had said. My chest felt like it was folding in on itself. Behind me, on the side table, sat a delicate silver brooch. My mother's. I pinned it to my dress earlier, like a gesture of approval from a woman who hadn't been alive for over 20 years. Would you have said yes, Mama? I whispered. Would you have let me give my life away just to make things easier for everyone else? A knock again. It's time. I opened the door, smile painted on. My brother adjusted his tie and said, You look perfect. Perfect. For whom? As we walked down the narrow corridor toward the ceremony chamber, I felt my knees wobble. Not from nerves. From clarity. 20 years of being the responsible daughter, the substitute mother, the one who said no to college because someone had to stay, the one who babysat so her sisters could party, who taught full-time and still made dinner every Sunday. I had done everything right, and none of it felt like my life. The double doors swung open. Guests turned. Thomas was already standing by the officiant, smiling that practiced, professional smile of his. He looked so polished, so ready, so certain. But the moment he placed his hand on mine, the weight of it wasn't warm. It was heavy, possessive, and when I tried to pull away ever so slightly, his fingers tightened like I was property. He leaned in and murmured, Breathe, sweetheart. I've got you. I smiled, but only with my teeth. The officiant cleared her throat. We are gathered here today. The words floated in the air, meaningless. I felt my pulse in my temples and my ribs. Then I heard it, my mother's voice, not from the brooch, not from the grave, but from somewhere buried inside me. Promise me, Isabel, you will live your life fully. For yourself. I blinked. The officiant was now looking directly at me. Isabel Moreno, do you take this man? No, the word left my lips before I even realized it had formed. It echoed through the room like a gunshot. Gasps. Silence. Thomas stiffened. What? I can't, I said, shaking my head. I'm sorry. I can't do this. I didn't wait. I turned and walked fast. Then I ran. I ran through the marble hallway, past the stunned guests, past my aunt clutching her pearls, past the flower girl dropping petals in confusion, out the front doors, into the dry New Mexico heat. And there, by some absurd twist of fate, was a man on a motorcycle. Leather jacket, boots, his helmet under one arm and a cigarette in the other. He raised an eyebrow as I barreled toward him, dress dragging behind me. Need a ride, he said, half laughing. Please, I panted. Just get me out of here. He stared at me for a moment. Then he nodded, tossed me a helmet, and said, Hop on. I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the courthouse. Not at the bewildered crowd spilling onto the steps. Not at the man I almost married. The bike roared to life beneath us. The wind tore at my veil, tugged my hair loose, filled my lungs with air I hadn't tasted in years. I gripped his waist not because I was scared, but because for the first time in decades I was moving, really moving. We drove for what felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. He dropped me off near the edge of town by the old arroyo. I got off without a word, handed him the helmet. You okay? He asked. I nodded. Thanks for the escape. He gave me a two-fingered salute and disappeared into the dusk. Barefoot, I walked the last half-mile home, dust caking my soles, skirt torn and gray from dragging along the cracked desert earth. The house came into view. My father's adobe, same as it had always been. Lights off. He must have been at the courthouse, trying to salvage the scandal. I climbed onto the porch and sat down, wedding dress and all. Tigray, my old orange tabby, appeared from under the steps and leapt onto my lap like nothing was out of the ordinary. He curled against me and purred softly, his warmth grounding me in a way nothing else could. My hands trembled. My heart raced. But my lungs finally knew what it was like to fill with air. I closed my eyes and whispered into the night, "This time, Ma?" I didn't let them choose for me. And Tigray purred louder, like he agreed. I woke to the creaking of floorboards above me and a ray of sunlight stretching across my face like a silent question. For a moment, I didn't remember. Not the courthouse, not the gasp from the crowd, not even the sound of my own voice breaking through 2 decades of silence. But then I saw the mess on the floor, my crumpled wedding dress like a discarded skin, and it all came back. Tigray was still curled by my feet, one paw resting on my ankle like a guardian. His fur twitched with every snore. I sat up slowly, the worn couch groaning under me. My body ached in places I didn't expect, neck, rib, soul. What did I do? I whispered. My phone buzzed before I could finish the thought. I didn't want to look, but I did. "Martin, answer the damn phone." "Lily, are you okay?" That was insane. "Call me." "Dad, 2 missed calls." And then my brother. As soon as I picked up, his voice exploded through the line. "Are you out of your mind?" "Hi to you too, Mateo," I muttered, wiping a dry patch of sleep from the corner of my eye. "Dad nearly had a heart attack. Thomas is humiliated. Do you even realize what you've done?" My fingers clenched around the phone. "Do you?" Silence. I could hear his breathing. I said no, Mateo. That's all. I said no to a man I didn't love at my own wedding. "You could have talked to someone first. You could have thought this through." I did think, for the last 20 years. Through college, I didn't attend. Through every night, I watched your kids so you and Carla could go out. Through every single moment, I put everyone else before myself. "You're being selfish," he snapped. I closed my eyes. Good. Maybe I need to be. I hung up before I could change my mind. My hands were shaking. I dropped the phone onto the couch and let my head fall back. The ceiling fan spun slowly, creaking in rhythm with the storm inside me. Later that afternoon, Lily came by. My best friend since 3rd grade. She didn't knock, just walked in with 2 gas station coffees and a bag of sour cream chips. "I knew you weren't going to go through with it," she said, handing me the coffee like it was medicine. "You what?" She gave me a sideways glance and sat down, her ripped jeans sliding easily over the sunken cushions. "You were sleepwalking," I essay. "The whole engagement. You barely even talked about him. You smiled, but it didn't reach your eyes." I stared into my cup. "Why didn't you stop me?" "Would you have listened?" I didn't answer. The question hung in the air between us, like a forgotten photograph. We sat in silence for a while, chewing chips, sipping coffee, listening to the wind roll over the desert. Tigray jumped up between us, pawing at my lap like he was claiming his territory. "You know what I envy." Lily said after a long pause, "You did something bold. You broke a script. Most people just live it out." "Is that what I did?" I asked. "Broke a script?" "You burned the damn play." I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, but someone must have let it slip. Maybe a cousin, maybe a guest who recognized the house. I didn't think he'd come after me. I was wrong. That night, I was almost asleep when the pounding started. It was violent, like someone was trying to break down the door. Tigray bolted upright and hissed, tail puffed like a bottle brush. I sat up slowly, heart racing. And then I heard it. Isabel. His voice. "Thomas, open the door. Now." Tigray launched himself off the couch and positioned himself between me and the door like a furry, low-to-the-ground warrior. The pounding grew louder. "I know you're in there. I backed into the kitchen and grabbed my phone, hands trembling. "I'll break it down, Isabel. Don't think I won't." And then the door exploded inward. He stood there, rumpled suit, breath sour with whiskey, hair disheveled, eyes wild. He looked nothing like the man I almost married. "You humiliated me," he growled, stepping inside. "Get out," I said, though my voice was barely audible. "Or I'll call the police." He laughed, harsh and cruel. "Oh yeah? You think anyone's gonna believe little Miss Perfect Thomas Green hit his fiancé?" He lunged for me, grabbed my arm, and then everything happened at once. Tigre flew through the air like a cannonball of orange fury, claws out, teeth bared. He landed squarely on Thomas's back, screeching. Thomas roared, flailing. I dove for the phone again, but he shoved me hard against the wall. Tigre clawed his neck, leaving deep red lines. Then, with one brutal motion, Thomas grabbed Tigre by the scruff and hurled him against the wall. A sickening thud, a cry. My heart cracked. I screamed and rushed to Tigre's limp body. "No, no, no!" But Thomas wasn't done. He grabbed me by the hair, raising his hand to strike, and then let go of my daughter. The voice was calm, cold, steel. My father stood in the doorway, a shotgun leveled at Thomas's chest. "Right now." Thomas froze. "Mr. Moreno, you so much as breathe wrong, and you won't leave this house standing," Dad said. "You and I can talk. Outside." Thomas hesitated, then backed off, spitting curses as he walked out. I collapsed beside Tigre, sobbing, fingers trembling as I cradled his tiny body. My father knelt beside me, glanced at the rising and falling of Tigre's chest, and said, "He's alive, but we need to go. Now." I nodded through tears. "Dad, I don't want to stay here anymore." He didn't answer, just placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "Then let's get him help. And after that, we'll figure it out." 2 days after we brought Tigre home from the vet, he finally lifted his head, just a little, but it was enough. I'd been sleeping on the floor next to his bed, one hand always resting gently on his back, counting the rise and fall of his breath like it was the only thing tethering me to earth. The vet had said it was a miracle. Bruised ribs, mild concussion, no internal bleeding. I didn't care if he walked crooked for the rest of his life. I just needed him here. But when he blinked up at me that morning, his eyes slow but focused, something shifted. Like the fog of fear started to lift. And what rose instead was something I hadn't felt in a long time. Restlessness. That evening, while the sun dragged itself behind the mountains and the desert wind carried the dry scent of sage, I sat at the old kitchen table and opened my laptop. Not with any plan, just habit, distraction. I scrolled through emails, ads, spam, an unread message from a teacher's forum I hadn't checked in months. The subject line was simple: "New position available rural school, Northern NM." I clicked. It was a small charter school near Taos, on the edge of tribal land. A full-time opening for a primary grade teacher. Emphasis on holistic learning, land-based education, and cultural integration. Housing included. Must be open to non-traditional pedagogy and local spiritual practices. I read the post 3 times, then a 4th. The words glowed on the screen like they were daring me. "Are you ready to start over?" I didn't let myself overthink it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed one line, "Hello. My name is Isabel Moreno. I'm interested. Can we talk?" I hit send, closed the laptop, took a breath. The next morning I had a reply. "Hola, Isabel. My name is Miguel Yazzie. I'm the acting director of Red Cedar Primary. Would love to speak." I stared at the message. Then I called. His voice was calm, low, with a kind of quiet confidence that felt older than the phone line connecting us. "Why are you interested in this position?" he asked. I had a list of answers prepared. Something about curriculum development, trauma-informed classrooms, my years of experience. But none of it came out. Instead, I said, Because I want to finally become the teacher I dreamed of being when I was 9. There was a pause on the line, and then he laughed. Softly, kindly. Well, he said, we built this school for people who dream like that. When can you come? My hand trembled as I wrote down the address. That night, I told my family. They thought I was kidding. You're moving where? My sister Clarissa shrieked, holding a spoon over her baby's high chair. Taos, I said. A school near the mountains. They offered me housing. What about here? What about the kids? What about Dad? I looked at my father. He sat silently at the head of the table, staring into his coffee. Since the night he'd saved me, he'd been distant. Not angry, just tired. You don't even have your own family, Clarissa added, her voice sharp. Now you want to go play teacher in some village. It hit me hard, not because it was cruel, though it was, but because it was true. I didn't have a husband, or children, or a mortgage. I didn't even have a dog, just Tigray, still healing in the corner, purring softly like a small machine. But for once, the truth didn't wound me. It clarified me. Exactly, I said. I have nothing holding me here. And I don't want to wake up one day at 60 and realize I never left the place where my life stopped moving. Clarissa rolled her eyes. Drama. I turned to my father. Dad, I need to go, but I'll call. I'll visit. I promise. He was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. Just once. I always knew, he said. One day you'd leave. I packed in silence. Old sweaters. My lesson binders, a few dog-eared books, Tigray's carrier, the red yarn bracelet one of my former students made me last Christmas. My brother Mateo showed up the night before I left. You really going? He asked from the doorway, his arms crossed, trying to act annoyed. You're just going to leave us with Clarissa's chaos and Dad's grumpiness. I smiled. You'll survive. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You know, I always thought you'd be the one to stay forever. I always thought that too, I whispered. He looked down, then back up. Good for you. At dawn, I loaded the last box into the back of my battered car. Tigray meowed from his crate, clearly displeased with the arrangement. Don't worry, I said, strapping him in. We're not running away this time. We're running toward something. I took one final walk around the house. Every corner held a memory, some sweet, some suffocating, but I didn't cry, not even when I saw the mirror in the hallway, the one where I first saw myself in that wedding dress and didn't recognize the woman staring back. This time I did. I thought I knew mountains. I'd seen them in magazines, on postcards, on dusty road trip billboards. But nothing prepared me for what rose beyond the windshield as I drove deeper into northern New Mexico. The Sangre de Cristo Range wasn't just landscape, it was presence. Old, watching, alive. Tigray stayed oddly quiet in the passenger seat, his carrier tipped just slightly so he could watch the clouds drift over the jagged peaks. The air grew thinner. The sky stretched wider. Every mile felt like a peeling away of layers I hadn't realized I was wearing. By the time I pulled into the tiny dirt lot outside Red Cedar Primary, the sun was low, painting the ground in gold and ash. A woman stood waiting near the front steps, tall, straight-backed, long black braid trailing down her shoulder like a ribbon of shadow. You must be Isabel, she said, offering a hand. Her grip was firm, eyes sharper than her age. Irina, she added, vice principal. I'm here to help you get settled. She spoke with a rhythm I hadn't heard before, like her words had roots, like they belonged to something older than English. I followed her toward a small adobe-style home beside the school, its roof sloping into the hillside, windows deep-set like resting eyes. This'll be yours, she said, unlocking the front door. Nothing fancy, but the bones are strong. Inside, the walls were cool, the floor uneven, the corners filled with dust motes dancing in slanted light. A faint smell of sage lingered in the air. I placed Tigray's carrier gently by the window. He stepped out cautiously, sniffing each creaking floorboard as if the wood might bite back. Irina glanced at him with a flicker of amusement. "He'll adjust," she said. "We all do." That evening, she made a fire in the Kiva fireplace without being asked. Her hands moved with the ease of someone who knew flame like an old friend. When she was done, she stood and faced me. "You feel it?" she asked. I blinked. "Feel what?" She nodded toward the window. "This land. It doesn't welcome you with open arms. Not at first. It watches, waits, decides if you're worth its stories." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. The next morning, the cold punched through the walls like a lesson. June in the city was sleeveless dresses and iced coffee. Here, it was frost on the glass and breath like mist. I bundled in layers and followed Irina across the gravel lot toward the school. The building looked like it had grown out of the ground. Thick beams, wide windows, painted tiles woven into the adobe. "Red Cedar isn't like other schools," she said as she opened the front doors. "We teach math and reading, yes, but also language, ceremony, land, spirit." Inside, the classroom smelled of cedar and something deeper, like earth after rain. There were no rows of desks, just round tables, floor cushions, handmade tapestries on the walls, a drum in the corner, stretched tight with rawhide and ringed with feathers. "That's the spirit drum," Irina said, catching my glance. "Gift from one of our elders. Children learn rhythm before they learn grammar." I ran a hand across the rim. The skin felt warm, alive. Irina smiled. "If it lets you touch it, that's a good sign." Later, she showed me the teacher's lounge. Small, quiet, one stained couch, a coffee maker from another decade, and a window that framed the mountains like a painting. I sat there a long time after she left, just breathing, just listening. The next day was my first with the students. 15 pairs of eyes stared at me as I stood at the front of the room. Most of them dark, curious, solemn. Some smiled, others just watched. But one didn't look at me at all. He sat in the back corner, arms crossed, blonde hair too bright for this room, jaw clenched like he'd swallowed every word he ever wanted to say. "That's Jaden," Irina whispered behind me. "He's quiet. Dad's raising him. Mom left 2 years ago. He doesn't speak much. His father's Miguel, our acting director," she added quietly. "But most folks don't say it out loud unless they need to." My chest tightened. I recognized that silence. I tried not to call on him. Didn't want to press. But as the other kids shared stories, drew trees, laughed, and fidgeted, Jaden stared out the window like he was somewhere else entirely. When class ended, the kids trickled out in bursts of noise and backpacks. Jaden lingered. He didn't speak, just slipped a folded paper onto my desk and walked away. I opened it. A sketch. Rough, smudged. A mountain. A tiny figure beneath it. A cat curled beside their feet. I looked out the window, toward the peaks, then back at the paper, and something in me whispered, "This is where it starts." It started with Tigray. One night, not long after my first week of classes, I woke to the sound of him growling, a low, guttural sound I'd never heard from him before. He stood on the edge of the bed, for bristling, eyes wide and wild. "Tigray." I murmured, reaching out. That's when the floor shifted. Not a noise, not a tremble, shift. Like the house had inhaled suddenly. Like the earth had rolled in its sleep and forgotten we were still on top of it. A low groan followed. The window rattled. Books slipped off the shelf and thumped to the floor. I grabbed Tigray, threw on a coat over my pajamas and bolted outside. Neighbors were already gathering, some in robes, others in boots and blankets, clutching flashlights and prayer beads. An old man across the road nodded at me. "Just the land greeting you," he said, calm as still water. "You're part of it now." I didn't sleep that night, not from fear, but from awe. This place didn't whisper its power. It roared it into your bones. The next day, Irina knocked on my door with a bundle of sage and a thermos of something warm and sharp-smelling. "Boil it," she said. "Drink it slow. Helps your body catch up to the altitude." She handed me the sage. "And this for the rest." "For the rest of what?" She smiled. "The ghosts. The heaviness. The things you brought with you." Inside, Tigray watched us from the window, his tail twitching. I burned the sage that night, not because I believed it would do anything, but because part of me hoped it might. A few days later, Nadia showed up. She knocked like she didn't want to be there, then shoved her way inside with a pot of something thick and fragrant. "Stew," she muttered. "You look like a scarecrow. You've been eating it all." I blinked. "Not really." She set the pot on the stove, took one look around the room, and sighed like it pained her. "That fire's not built right. You're wasting wood." She knelt, rebuilt the kindling with the precision of an old soldier. "There, now it'll breathe." I watched her in silence, unsure what to make of this sudden intrusion. She'd barely looked at me during staff meetings. Once, she muttered something about outsiders and whiteboard teachers under her breath. But now she was stirring stew like she'd raised me. After we ate, she sat back, arms crossed. "I've seen a lot of new teachers come and go," she said. "They come in all full of ideas. Holistic this, trauma-informed that. But when the winter hits, or a kid cries, they're gone before spring." "I'm not going anywhere," I said softly. She studied me, eyes narrowed. "We'll see." But she came back the next night, with bread. At school, things shifted. The kids began opening up. Questions spilled out of them. About grammar, yes, but also about why the moon changes shape, why dreams feel real, why hearts hurt when someone leaves. And Jaden started to smile. Just once at first. A crooked half lift of the lips when I tripped over a Navajo word and made fun of myself. Then, in art class, he brought me a leaf he'd painted with tiny blue symbols. "Protection," he whispered. "For your cat." I pinned it above my desk. But it didn't last. One afternoon, while reviewing spelling journals, the classroom door slammed open. A woman entered, tall, striking, lips painted a shade of red that looked expensive and deliberate. Her heels clicked across the floor like gunshots. "I'm looking for Jaden Yazzie." She didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. The resemblance was unmistakable. "Hello, Veronica," I said, standing slowly. She blinked, surprised, then composed herself. "I'm his mother." Jaden had frozen in his seat, his hands clenched into fists on the desk. "Jaden, sweetie," she cooed, walking toward him. "Mommy's here to take you for the week. Just us. A special treat." He didn't move, didn't speak. I could see the terror beneath his silence. "Is that okay, Jaden?" I asked gently. He nodded, but his body said something else. Veronica turned to me. "So you're the famous Miss Moreno." She looked me up and down, took in the room. The drum, the leaf. The leaf I hadn't realized she was staring at. "I heard you've been involved. With my ex-husband. And my son." Her tone was ice, with a sugar rim. "I care about him," I said carefully. "Both of them." "I'm sure you do," she replied, grabbing Jaden's hand. "But let's remember whose son he actually is." She left in a flurry of perfume and judgment. That night, I sat on the porch, Tigray in my lap, the leaf from Jaden fluttering slightly in the wind. I couldn't stop thinking about his face when she took him. Not angry, not scared, just gone, like he'd folded himself up and disappeared into the tiniest corner of himself to survive. I whispered into the dusk, "Come back to me, Jaden. When you're ready, I'll be here." And Tigray purred like a promise. He came back 3 days later. I was shelving books in the reading corner when I looked up and saw him standing silently in the doorway, backpack slung low, hair messy, cheeks wind-chapped. Jaden didn't say anything, just walked to his seat, pulled out a pencil, and started writing. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. When the class ended, and the others spilled outside for recess. He stayed behind, waited until the room was empty. Then he walked over and placed something small and smooth in my palm. A stone, dark gray with a single white vein curling through it, like lightning. My dad says this kind helps with sadness, he said. I think maybe you need it. I stared at the stone, then at him. My throat tightened. I tried to speak, but no words came. So I just nodded, closed my fingers around the gift, and whispered, "Thank you." And in that moment, I knew something had changed. Not just in him, in me. That evening, I ran into Elia at the local store. She was standing in front of the tea section, manicured fingers tapping against her shopping basket. I tried to move past without a word, but her voice found me anyway. "You really made yourself comfortable here, didn't you?" I paused, not because I didn't expect it, but because of the venom in her tone. "Elia," I said carefully, "I don't want to fight with you." She stepped closer, eyes blazing. "You don't belong here, Isabel. You waltzed in, took my job, took my place, and now what? You think you're part of this community because you teach their children and burn sage." I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't take anything from you," I said, "and I didn't come here to replace anyone." Her jaw clenched. "You think he loves you, don't you?" I blinked. "Who?" "Don't play stupid." For a moment, we just stared at each other, and then something in her expression cracked. The anger softened just enough to let the pain show through. "I was there when Veronica left," she said. "I helped Miguel pick himself up. I sat with Jaden when he cried himself to sleep. I was there." "I believe you," I said gently. "I know you care." She looked away. "Then why you?" I wanted to say I didn't know, but that wasn't true. "Because I didn't try to be what he needed," I said. "I just was." She didn't respond, just turned and walked away, her shoulders stiff, basket swinging by her side like a weight she couldn't put down. At school, whispers started. Parents stopped making eye contact. Children began bringing talismans, woven thread bracelets, salt pouches tied with ribbon. One little girl handed me a carved stone and said, "My grandma says this will protect you from the spirits you brought." I thanked her and added it to the growing pile in my drawer. I knew where it came from. Veronica was back in town, and she wasn't subtle. She accused me publicly of manipulating Miguel, of bewitching Jaden, of corrupting the classroom with spiritual nonsense. She even called for my removal during a school board meeting. I was ready to pack my bags. Again. But Nadia stood up. She rose slowly during the meeting, cleared her throat, and said, "I've been teaching here for 40 years. I've seen many come and go. But Isabel Moreno? She stayed. She stayed when others would have run. And these children, they listen to her. They trust her. Because she listens back." The room fell silent, and I didn't cry. Not until I got home and found Tigre curled around my shoes, his orange fur warm against my skin. That night, Jaden ran away. He showed up on my porch at dusk, cheeks flushed, arms wrapped around his knees. "Mom's busy," he said, voice flat. "She's been on the phone with her new boyfriend for hours." I sat beside him, pulled a blanket over our shoulders. "Does your dad know where you are?" "He's at the office, talking to Irina. I heard them say your name." I looked at him. "What did you hear?" He hesitated. "That mom wants to take me to Phoenix. That she found a lawyer. That she's going to win." The wind picked up. A lone coyote howled somewhere in the hills. I tried to steady my breath. "She's going to do what she always does," he whispered. "Take me somewhere, then disappear." I reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. "I'm not going anywhere, Jaden." He looked up at me, eyes shining. "Dad told me he loves you." I froze. Then I nodded. "I love him too." He held my gaze. "Then I'm okay if you become my new mom." I smiled through the tears. "Only if you're ready. No rush." No pressure. I'm ready. And in that moment, under the desert sky, a child who had never chosen me did. Winter came like a hush, not a blizzard, not a storm, just a quiet settling of white across the land, like the sky itself had exhaled. The mountains turned soft at the edges. Footsteps crunched like secrets. The air grew thin and holy. Miguel started coming by in the evenings, always in silence, always with something in his hands, firewood, dried herbs, a book he thought I might like. He never asked to stay. He just did. Tigre loved him, which meant everything. One night, I found Miguel sitting at my kitchen table with a carving knife and a block of cedar. I watched as he whittled slowly, fingers sure and steady, shaving pieces into curls. "What are you making?" I asked. He didn't look up. "A box. For the children's offerings. So the spirits don't feel forgotten." When it was finished, he handed it to me. Simple, sturdy, smelled like home. I placed all the charms and protection, tokens the kids had given me inside, one by one, as if honoring something sacred. Jaden visited after school most days, usually with Tigre trailing behind him like a tiny guardian. He brought sketches, questions, sometimes just silence, and I gave him what I could. Time, space, a steady presence. Veronica didn't win. Despite her threats, her lawyers, her declarations of motherhood and intent, the court ruled in Miguel's favor. Stability mattered. So did truth. And love, real love, however messy, found a way to speak loudest. She left town the following week. Miguel and I didn't celebrate. We just sat in the quiet, a candle flickering between us, Tigre asleep at our feet. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "She'll come back, but we'll be ready." There was no triumph in his voice, just peace. One weekend, as the snow began to thaw, he asked me to take a trip with him. "Just us," he said. "There's somewhere I want to show you." We left early, bundled in layers, Tigre safely curled at home under Nadia's watchful eye. Miguel drove the old truck up winding paths that eventually vanished into forest. Then we walked. The path wasn't marked. He led me past birch trees and frozen creeks, through silence so complete it made the world feel holy. Eventually we reached a clearing. Ribbons hung from branches, red, white, blue, green, fluttering softly like prayers. At the center stood a stone altar, moss-covered, ancient. "My grandfather used to bring me here," Miguel said. "He taught me to tie my wishes into the wind." He pulled a small strip of fabric from his pocket, handed me another. "What do I do?" I whispered. "Tie it," he said, "and ask for what your soul needs most. Not what your mind wants, what your spirit craves." I closed my eyes, feeling the wind on my cheeks. I thought about the life I'd left, the woman I used to be, the silence, the service, the obedience, the fear, and then I tied my ribbon and whispered, "Let me stay true, even when the world tells me to bend." When I opened my eyes, he was watching me, his face unreadable, but his eyes were wide open. "I brought you here for a reason," he said. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ring. Not new, not polished, something old, handmade. The silver dulled by time, the turquoise in its center cracked slightly like a riverbed. "This belonged to my grandmother," he said. "She gave it to my mom. My mom gave it to me." He stepped forward, took my hand. "I'm not a man of speeches, but when you showed up here, something inside me started breathing again, like the land had been holding its breath until you arrived." My heart pounded. "And I think," he continued, "maybe the wind knows our names for a reason. Maybe it's been calling us toward this moment for longer than we realize." He looked down, then up, eyes steady. "Will you marry me?" I didn't cry. I smiled. Soft, steady. "Yes," I said. Not because I needed saving. Not because it was expected. Because this time the choice was mine. The wedding was small. Spring arrived with thunder and rainbows and wildflowers that bloomed out of nowhere. The children made decorations from pine cones and paper. Nadia brought stew. Jaden walked me down the path, a flower behind his ear, beaming like the sun had chosen him personally. Miguel stood waiting under the wide open sky, the mountains behind him like silent witnesses. Tigre, of course, sat proudly beside us, his orange tail flicking like a metronome. When I said my vows, I didn't promise perfection, or forever. I promised honesty, patience, and presence. That night, under a blanket of stars, as the fire crackled and laughter drifted through the trees, I sat beside the man I loved and the boy who had chosen me. And I realized this wasn't my second life. This was the first time I'd truly lived mine. Looking back, I think the most important lesson I learned is this. Sometimes life doesn't need a grand plan. It just needs one brave moment of saying no to the path everyone else laid out for you. I spent years trying to be what others expected, dutiful, quiet, agreeable, and it nearly hollowed me out. But the moment I left everything behind and stepped into the unknown, I began to hear my own voice again. I learned that home isn't always where you're born. Sometimes it's the place that finally lets you breathe. Sometimes it's a boy handing you a spirit stone, or a man carving a box with care, or a cat curling up at your feet when your world feels like it's falling apart. I learned that love doesn't save you, it sees you. And when it's real, it doesn't ask you to become someone else. It holds space for exactly who you are. And most of all, I learned that healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in seasons, in wind, in firelight, in ribbons tied to trees, and whispered wishes no one else hears. So if you're standing at the edge of something terrifying, if the path ahead looks too wild, too strange, maybe that's exactly where your real life begins. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to move forward anyway. That's what I did, and it led me home.